What is up, YouTube, and what is up? If you would have told me 6 months ago or 8 months ago that we'd be having a conversation about mandatory vaccines in order to keep your employment, I would have thought it was a stretch, but here we are. And over the last 2 weeks, I think I've heard some pretty major companies come out, like Facebook and Google, saying that they're going to require vaccines. Walmart, I think, was the most recent, if I'm not mistaken. And even smaller organizations, I'm hearing friends and family members who are being told that they need to show proof of vaccinations to keep employment. And so it can be pretty stressful if you have a pretty deeply held belief that you don't need to get a vaccination, and then the only way you can keep your job is to get a vaccination. And so some people may be resorting to doing things that are not quite ethical, maybe even a little borderline illegal. And I just thought, hey, before you guys start doing something like that, let's talk about what your legal options are, I guess. And there are not a ton of them, but there are some options that you have. So before we get started, I think it's important just to point out that I am not a legal expert. I'm not an attorney. This in no way is legal advice. But with that said, I do have quite a bit of experience in human resources. And as a human resource expert, I did quite a bit of work around accommodation, both for religious purposes as well as for disability purposes. So I have a pretty good feel for how that process works and what your recourse would be as an employee. So let's jump into it. You probably got some sort of email or notification that you are going to be required to get the vaccine in order to maintain your employment. So that can be kind of shocking. What is the first step you should take? Here's what I would recommend is that the first thing that you do is that you provide a response to your employer, either preferably through email so that you have a record of it. You can say something along the lines of, you know what, I recognize that you are asking all employees to get vaccinated. I wanted to let you know that I have a deeply held religious belief, or you want to throw in a moral obligation, an ethical obligation, a religious belief, a sincerely held religious belief that doing something like taking the vaccine goes against what morally, ethically, religiously I stand for. And I wanted to have a conversation with you about other alternatives, other things that I might be able to do in order to keep my employment but not take the vaccination. So that's step one. So now what you've done is you've put the employer on notice, right? So now they know that you have a religious objection to taking the vaccine. The ball is sort of in their court at this point. By sending that email to the employer, you're putting them on notice that you do have a religious objection and that you want to talk about it, that you're open to ideas, you're open to providing suggestions and opening to hearing of suggestions that they might have. Now, this is important. This is actually a legal obligation that they have. So as soon as they know that you have a religious need or an accommodation that's needed, they have a legal obligation to have at least some sort of conversation with you and find out a little bit more and see if there's something that can be done. Now with disabilities are required to be accommodated at a pretty high level, and the law doesn't really care about the employee's finances in most cases. Like, the employer has to just accommodate and has to, in a lot of cases, bend over backwards to accommodate a disability. But in a religious sense, the employer is not required to make the same level of accommodation. If it's any kind of undue hardship for them, then they don't have to accommodate that. They're not required to go through some real serious burden and to provide an undue hardship for themselves or cost for themselves in order to accommodate your religious belief, right? One other thing I wanted to point out real quick. There was a case, I think it was in Texas. It's hot in here, I'm sweating, it's Arizona. So there was a case, I think it was in Texas, where some employees were denied a religious accommodation because they were Catholic. They were professed Catholics, and I think they said that they were Catholic in their statement. And so the employer just simply said, you can see that Catholics, they actually are supportive of vaccination, so there's no religious accommodation needed. These employees, through their regularly practiced religion, they go to a religion that encourages this. So how can we possibly need to do a religious accommodation? So as you think about when you're going to make a response to the employer, you may want to consider there's a religious entity that maybe you tie to that is pro-vaccine or has encouraged vaccines. Now, that doesn't mean that everyone within that religion definitely has the same feeling towards vaccinations. And so you may need to talk more about your personally held beliefs and how your religion encompasses more than a week-to-week routine that you do and go to, who you go to church with and where you go to church. Oftentimes, many religions encompass so much more, and what you learn outside of the four walls of the church, and the things that you learn on your own and through your own personal study and scripture study and prayer and meditation. So keep that in mind as you make this request to your HR department, that religion can be interpreted pretty broadly, and you want to make sure that you don't make it so specific that they can narrow in and say, oh, you're a Catholic. Well, Catholics don't believe that, so there's no accommodation needed, right? But here's the great thing about COVID. Over the last 18 months, what we've learned is that so many jobs can be done from home, right? A lot of people have been working from home. Now the employer is sometimes asking employees come back to the office. But if you have been working from home and now you're being asked to take a vaccine, the most reasonable, just in your face accommodation would be just allow you to keep working from home. Now you don't interact with anybody, you can continue to collaborate. And if the employer were to say, no, you know what, work from home was just during during COVID, but it's really not optimal, well, you're gonna have to prove that, because for the last 18 months, I've been working from home, I've gotten good reviews, you said I've been doing a good job, why can't I keep doing that, right? Okay, so to the question of, can the employer require that you get the vaccine or lose your job? The answer is maybe. So in some cases, if you are heavily customer focused or customer interacting, I should say, face-to-face interacting, or you have a lot of really close contact with coworkers, very likely the courts are going to find that they're going to refer to or defer to the employer's view of the risk assessment that they're taking, and you may be required to take the vaccine in order to keep your employment. However, the more minimal your contact is with customers and with coworkers, and if you're able to do your job from home, there's a very high likelihood that an accommodation could be done at basically no cost to the employer, and it should be something that they would reasonably consider. So before you start doing anything illegal to try to show that you have proof of vaccination, take the legal route, talk to your HR department, see if there's a religious accommodation. Okay, that's it. So hopefully that helps a little bit. If not, no charge. And if it was helpful, it was free. Have a great one. We'll talk to you later. Bye.